Everybody, I'm Mike the Man, and thank you for watching my channel. Lauren from Facebook on X had brought to my attention a few statements by Chris Watts, who, of course, was responsible for taking the lives of his wife and daughters. And there are certain statements that Chris Watts had made that are quite similar to statements that have been made by the Proudfoots. First of all, the stories that the Proudfoots have been dwelling on in one of the last interviews, the WSMV video interview, they were all old stories. Maybe not every single one of them. I don't know about the story that she went bowling and he said, "You got wrecked, Mom." There's something about these stories that really sits. There is this inner feeling of disgust almost that I have when I hear the Proudfoot speak about Sebastian. And it doesn't really matter to me if it is Chris and Katie bashing him, how he was through their eyes recently, or when they rehash these really old stories and Chris says, "Green tea." He imitates Sebastian's voice from one of the videos. And they thought it was really funny. And so that church lady who interviewed them, yeah, she was laughing about this and giggling about it, or she has a certain way also that is, like when she said, "He's coming home, right?" There's something about the way she interviews them, which is, it's absolutely great for getting statements because she is so much on their side. But I'm also wondering, how can a journalist be so much on somebody's side? Of course, they had their attorney present, and Proudfoots probably demanded that whoever is going to interview them will do a fluff job. I mean, they probably realized we're not going to get an interview unless we have somebody who just expresses what I don't see how anybody could express it, knowing what we know about the Proudfoots, knowing how he has beaten Sebastian, knowing what the CBS reports. I looked her up on Twitter to send her Seth Rogers' video, to ask her, have you had a chance to actually hear what Sebastian endured at home? Because I felt like she is just in this little bubble. Maybe she has her friends at church and they don't allow themselves to pay attention to too much of what's going on out there. I don't know. I mean, I am a different person. Even if I think somebody is innocent, if a case is still open, if there are so many unanswered questions, it is very hard for me not to think about the what ifs. You know what I mean? Even if I don't analyze a statement, even if I don't get deeper into something, it's very difficult for me to just blindly support anybody. I don't know how to do that. And I have always been like that. Even as a child, I always think about the what ifs and I always ask too many questions, which is why this profession is ideal for me. Suddenly I get the rewards and don't get told, you ask too many questions. So, freedom, baby, yeah. I noticed that this woman, that interviewer on Twitter, she posts maybe once every month or every other month, and she engages in absolutely no conversations on Twitter. It was not a surprise to me. I don't think she knows. I think she's the type of person that is, it was easy to pick her because she does not strike me like what I would consider an investigative journalist. And her questioning also irked me a little bit because, like I said, how can you be so 100% on somebody's side when there are so many red flags out there? And the way that they love to speak about Sebastian when he was younger, stories from when he was younger, but leaving out the recent realities completely. It was kind of like a PR move where somebody had a big argument with somebody, didn't get along with somebody, something happens to that person, and then they pretend they were the best friend. They were the best friend. Happens a lot when somebody passes away. When somebody tries to tell the public everything was absolutely amazing, because that person is no longer there to say, wait a minute, this guy wasn't my friend. This guy was not amazing. This was not a good person. And we see it all of the time. So it was very hard for me actually to listen to the last part of that interview on WSMV, simply because of that. It was really cringy for me. I listened to it. I didn't write anything down. I didn't want to transcribe any of it. I haven't seen anything of value in it yet. I haven't seen any statements where I can say, okay, this is worth examining further. So, having said all that, now let's begin, people. Chris Watts. There are statements that he made which do remind me of statements that the prophets have made at one point or the other. He said, everyone has their own opinions, of course. This comes from a person who has knowledge about what took place. He is very confident in saying that. He doesn't discredit, he's trying to discredit the people who point fingers at him. He doesn't say they are wrong. He simply wants to categorize suspicions as opinions, recategorize them. He doesn't want to validate suspicions as being just that. Real suspicions, reasonable suspicions. He wants these suspicions to appear unreasonable. And since he has knowledge of what took place, he cannot go by knowledge. He cannot exercise any knowledge, because the knowledge points the finger right back at him, as do the others. Chris Proudfoot did something similar. He talked about everybody has their own opinions. He said that several times. And their opinions of what happened, and their opinions of this, and their opinions of that. And all of the statements that he had made indicate that he knows exactly what happened. I have done this in a previous video, very systematically, where I have pointed out where he talked about people and their opinions of who they are, but he wants them to see who they truly are. or he says people don't know who they truly are. So when truly comes into place, he is leaning on motive, that people do not understand the reason all of this happened. He's giving it to you. Yeah, you may be right about what you're suspecting, but you don't have a right to judge because you don't understand what all happened before. And as his language has indicated, he is talking about how horrible, in his opinion, it was to live with Sebastian. That's what he wants to have sympathy with. That's why he's telling all of you, this guy, he peed on himself, and this, and oh my god, he plays Minecraft. Nobody plays Minecraft. Well, it turns out, according to Google, Minecraft is the most popular game among teenagers. He was looking for anything. He was trying to hold on to any type of reason that Sebastian could appear to you like somebody that's not worth saving. He is trying to tell you, you don't understand what it was like to be in the house with him, even though he was the abuser. That is victim blaming, people. Victim blaming. And this is not only about trying not to get busted, but it is coming from a person who always thinks or needs to have the belief that he is right, even when the rest of the world knows better. And in his case, it's not sociopathic as it is with Katie. And about Chris Watts, I'm not sure if he is a sociopath or not. He definitely shows traits. In my opinion, Katie Proudfoot, Casey Anthony, and Ted Bundy, Charles Manson, O.J. Simpson also, and that cop who took the lives of three of his three wives. Drew Peterson, he is also a perfect example of a sociopath. This is whom Katie Proudfoot reminded me of immediately, those people. Certain statements she has made, the inappropriate giggle, so many different things, the duping delight magnified. She is a true sociopath. So her statements, I look at them in a different light than I would somebody like Chris Proudfoot, who, by the way, mostly talks from Katie Proudfoot's script, in my opinion, that she came up with. She is the writer, he's the performer. You know, if any of you remember The Who, the band, Pete Townsend wrote all the songs, but he sang none of them. He couldn't sing. Roger Daltrey, he sang all of the songs, but he didn't write any of them. That's kind of how I look at these people. That Katie is the person, is the mastermind. Now, at this point, I will later get into the premeditation question. And be very careful with what you determine. I'm not excluding that possibility, by the way. I'm telling you what language indicates. Are there signs that this was planned? That this was executed in a planned manner? Does the language indicate it? And I haven't seen that. I have seen somebody who didn't care how over-medicating her son would impact him and what results would come from that. And that doesn't mean the possibility of taking his life hasn't played through their minds what they would do if. So before I make these determinations, I need to look at the fine line. I need to recognize all of the possibilities Because I've stated before, they are negligent homicides, they are also negligent suicides, where somebody doesn't care about his life and drives so recklessly that he dies. Was it a suicide or wasn't it? All of this I'm telling you because I want your mind not to go so quickly to determining something without language actually indicating it. We are looking for the language indicating whether or not something was premeditated. And yes, I understand that this happened on the anniversary of the divorce, the anniversary date of the divorce, supposedly. I haven't looked up these certain facts, but people have brought this to my attention. And that doesn't mean that certain things don't play with the minds of the people who are involved. So all of the things that have been sent my way about why people think this was premeditated are being considered. And they're still being left up there. Not in the air, yes, it's sort of in the air, right up there. Like clouds over my head. They're swirling over my head. All of the different possibilities. And again, statement analysis will give you a lot of freedom, where you are able to determine what happened to a degree. And you don't have to waste your time going into all different directions, which is what I see people do in many of the discussions. They don't have a clue. And they don't try to get a clue either. They simply are happy arguing with each other. And somebody just made a great comment and said, I do not support people who support KP or CP, but I don't support everybody. I don't watch everybody that supports Seth Rogers either. And thank you for that comment. Thank you. Just because you say, I support Seth Rogers, doesn't mean you provide anything of quality. It's simply that there are people out there, they align themselves with what is called the Green Team for their own reasons or agendas. So be very careful with associations, because it's very easy to get sucked into a narrative or something that sounds good to most people, and then you have to go like, wait a minute, no. How did we get there? How did we get to the point that you expect me now to accept something as a fact that hasn't been shown? Sure, it aligns with the support of Sebastian's father, but we cannot allow ourselves to do that. Life is not that convenient. This profession is not that convenient that we can simply go out there and say, okay, I got it. I think this. No. Wait a minute. We can all talk about what we think and what we conclude. So, I talked before about the third at 10 p.m. His face falling, hitting the ground, and that's what I know, because Katie has told us in her own language what happened, what took place. What happened after that? Yes, I recognize the nudge when he mentioned Clarksville. Is that where we should look for Sebastian? I don't know. Maybe. He told us he doesn't want to tell us where to look, because if we happen to find Sebastian there, then people say he did it. Did what exactly? If you tell me Sebastian is in Clarksville somewhere, and we find him there and he's okay, then you're the hero. No, Chris telling us that if we find Sebastian, that will be very bad for him. Very bad for him. You see, he's putting his foot in his mouth again. Everything that he says when he reads from Katie Proudfoot's script is pretty good. In his own mind, it is absolutely genius. That's why he's so confident. But the moment that he gets ahead of himself, because he gets such a high from this, He gets all the recognition he always wanted. So he tells you all, there's zero evidence, nothing will ever be found. It's basically a child saying, I know something you don't, but I'm not going to tell you. That's exactly what Chris Proudfoot is getting a kick out of. He loves that. He loves to play around. He's also extremely obvious. And Katie is extremely not obvious. To most people. Unless we have experience with people like that. And then we see the red flags. And again, Chris Watts, is he a sociopath? Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I have not looked into him enough. But he said everyone has their own opinions. Yep, very dismissive, like, okay, I'm not gonna get into this. He can't get into this, because if he does, then too much, he cannot allow himself to get into this. And by the way, this is how later on he wound up getting caught. His confession. That was a step-by-step thing, and it was an ideal situation because the police, in my opinion, understood that he had a need to blame his wife for something. So the scenario of his wife hurting the children and him just reacting to that by taking his wife's life. That was something that appealed to him so much, where he was able to say, yes, I did her in, but guess what she did? That was an out. That was a perfect out. You see, in a good investigation, you want to give the suspect an out that appeals to him. So when, even though he was the one who did it all, the whole fault lies on him. But creating that scenario where his wife, who can no longer speak on her own behalf or her children's behalf, is being blamed, and he thinks, you know what? This sounds really good. She can no longer talk. Who's gonna know? But of course, the moment that Chris Watts said, I killed my wife, then, of course he knew where the bodies are. Really? Okay, cool. Wow, that's... I remember his father was there with him when he confessed to that and told his story. And oh my God, Chris, oh my God. And then of course it was too late for him to backpedal from that. Because they said, okay, then show us the bodies now. Obviously, it's you who got rid of them. So from there, it was very easy to put the case together. Then you could go step by step. You already had him in custody for the killing of his wife. He could have kept his mouth shut. He could have played this out for a very long time, Chris Watts. He could have played dumb and just say, I don't know anything. Well, the neighbors, they had him on camera. I'm not sure exactly how long he could have gotten away with that. And what his lawyers could have argued. But the confession really, really helped. And that's something we don't have with the Proudfoots. And he was by himself. He was on his own. And the Proudfoots are a team. I think they have a lot of time discussing everything that they should or shouldn't do. And as Chris has stated, this is like Groundhog Day. Everywhere we go, people recognize us. Then they snap pictures of us. He says, well, that's they're right. I don't know if it's even, it must be the people's right to do that when you're in the public eye, right? I don't know. But it bothers him because now he is no longer able to be who he thinks he is, because he is recognized for who he truly is. He's trying to tell you he truly isn't that monster that the media portrays him as, or that people think he is, but he won't go into detail. He's just telling you, you don't know me. Have you ever met people who are doing terrible things and are habitual liars, often thieves, and you don't know me? That's what they say when they get confronted with something or get caught. That is their argument. You don't know me. What they want to tell you is that their motive is something that you shouldn't judge because you haven't been in my shoes and all of that stuff. These are people that will always make excuses. They are very quick to point the fingers. They are very quick to beat the 15-year-old because he forgot his belt. They are very fast to jump to that gun, but when it comes to them, you don't know who I truly am. They cannot handle that. They were probably punished too when they were children, but they aligned with their punishers and sort of excluded the rest of the world when it comes to allowing people in to help guide them. And so they escape into their world that they have created around what they grew up in, which is in perfect alliance with what the people who punished them expected from them, and tell themselves that this is my world and this is the right world. And this is the right word for me. And in my world, I'm a black and white kind of guy. That's what Chris Proudfoot told us. What does that mean? A black and white kind of guy. Well, it means back off. This is how I do things. That's how I'm gonna do things. I don't care if CPS has already been 5 times to my home. Yes, bring him in a 6th time. I'm not going to change what I'm doing. The only thing I can do is stay away from your house. To stay away from Sebastian and tell you that it's me or him. Because now he knew things were gonna get worse. And apparently he made a statement that the last time he saw Sebastian the beginning of February and then on the 26th, is that correct? I haven't looked it up because several people have sent this to me, and I would like to hear actually what interview that was in, where he actually said it. So did he come back home that night? By the way, I said in the very beginning, he may have just put his phone, which is his alibi, down in Memphis and drove down, keeping the call going between him and Katie. That could have been the case. I have not seen anything that speaks against it. I have not seen any evidence against it. I also think that, some of the things that Seth repeated as fact, because it was given to them by law enforcement, may not be factual. Police is allowed to lie to you in the United States. Some of you may be from countries where it's not. So there are many countries out there. Police is not allowed to lie. As I've stated before, there were many times, if you had watched forensic files like I did religiously 20 years ago, you probably know of many cases where the cops lost evidence, didn't have probable cause, were stuck. They came up with a lie, and the next day they saw the guy buy cleaning supplies, scrubbing his, throwing away all the carpets, scrubbing the floor underneath it, because police came up with something to see how the person will react. So when they said to him, that was a trash truck, no, I'm sorry, just because law enforcement says it, doesn't mean it's so. So I don't have the again, I don't have the convenience to accept something as fact really quickly and say, okay, say 2 months later, oh, okay, I'm sorry, so yeah, okay, disregard everything I said before. I guess, no, I don't do that. Statement analysis is very, very, well, black or white, as Chris would say. Except it isn't completely black or white, because nothing is, but it is pretty cut and dry. Once you have the statements, and once you can analyze them, and once the person speaks to you in their language, and you analyze the patterns, and a lot of times it's not just the analysis of the statements, but you recognize the patterns, and when the patterns change. And that's how Katie Proudfoot gives herself away. How jovial she is when she talks about Sebastian when he's younger. Those were the good times for her. Sebastian was very little and he was probably a scared little kid, scared of Chris, but he wasn't able to verbalize everything. And from what I understand, they bought this new house in 2022, right? Please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm now just repeating some things that you guys, some of you have sent to me. And so, yeah, that was a COVID time, right? So they moved to a new neighborhood. Apparently in the previous neighborhood, everything was still okay. That's where he taught Sebastian how to ride a bike. Seth actually said he was the one who taught him. And yes, I stand by what I've said about that video they initially published. Yes, there is AI modification. It's very clearly visible. I have also seen the original. That one seems to be just a regular video. So why would they do that? I have no idea. But let's be very careful arguing these things. Grok is not wrong about this one. It's not a speculation, people. Even though some people with an agenda want to use that to discredit people who are investigative. That's a form of gaslighting. Gaslighting is also when a person, an abuser, isolates his victim. That's done usually for two reasons. Number one, they don't want witnesses. They don't want Sebastian to go to friends' houses and have the parents recognize maybe a bruise, or maybe Sebastian would say, oh, I don't want to go home now. I don't know, maybe Chris will be there, or something like that, and then lead to more questions and have more people to support them. They want to cut off support, the abusers. That's why they isolate Sebastian. And the second one is, it's a form of gaslighting. They want their victim to feel like there's nobody out there who would help them. Turns out, a lot of people would have probably helped Sebastian had they only known. So by keeping others from knowing about what's going on in your home, it's easier to make a child think, I have no power, it's just me. This was now starting to change because Sebastian was being questioned again and again and again because of the CPS reports. What's really going on in your house? And he was getting better at it. He was now being empowered for the first time. Little by little, these reports didn't go away. They started, I think, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, something like that. And now, that was not going to end well for Chris. So everyone has their own opinions. Absolutely. Everything's checked out. It's Chris Watts. No sign of them leaving, yeah. You know what? If it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck. Give me a break. That's why this PI wants you to look at this video and be able to say, look, there he is. Because people, even if they know very little about the case, have told me, how can this be? This is not possible for him not to be seen on any camera. Aside from anything that Proudfoot may have said, aside from anything else, just that alone, no, you better look at that house. That's what a few people have told me who were not that familiar with the case. They have read me on X and immediately realized there's something that has not been examined yet. And where's Sebastian's body? Is it in the house? Is it on the way to Alaska somewhere? Is it, I don't know, is it somewhere on a construction site? Has he been bulldozed down, as Katie's language might indicate? Is it somewhere in or around Clarksville, which could be a sensitive area? I do not know these things, but I cannot jump to any conclusions. I can keep these flags out there. So if something else comes my way that aligns with those flags, then I have a new path opening up. So I'm sorry, I cannot give you too much more than what I have, but what I have is what I really have. But there were no signs of them leaving, of him and his family. Right. Except the neighbor caught you on camera. And they were not leaving. You removed their bodies. The front door was locked. The same thing. The front door was locked. Was it locked from the inside? Okay, so what did you guys do? You just opened that one window and said this must be it? To allow a possibility? The first 3 days it was treated like a runaway case. The police did not do what they could have done. And yes, when I say Katie Proudfoot fooled a lot of people, some people tell me, no, she's not fooling anybody. Well, she did in the beginning, including many law enforcement professionals who are usually very good with their analyses. They spend far too much time looking at Chris because he took the fall. Chris was her red herring. And now, of course, this changes because in these interviews, she takes the lead. People are finally pointing it out. What is going on here? Why is the mother not talking? We don't want to hear from the stepfather. Especially now about the CPS reports and all these things. People say, we don't want to, what is this guy doing talking? Sure, on these lives he's doing it. I mean, anybody, even if they don't know about the case, if they hear any of the stuff he's talking about, joking, he's coming on to Terry Lynn or whatever her name is, and I see all these videos. It's not that, none of this is surprising to me. Because we already know all that. But we also know where to point the finger. Who was there that moment? I don't think Chris was there at 10 p.m. when the thud took place. Sorry about that. I don't think he was there for that. The alibi was the phone. Well, if they hung it up around midnight, which he said, and now the original timeline of when he showed up for work has changed from what I understand. He was there at what, 7 or 6:30? 7? It's a 3-hour and what, 10-minute drive at night with no traffic? He could have made it down there. Look at that video at 3:10 a.m. Look at that video. That could have been, from what I understand, that could have been him. Doesn't mean it was, but yes, it could have been Chris Proudfoot, in my opinion. I haven't seen anything to dispute that. He could have, after that call, said, I'm coming down. Show up. How long is that video? Just a few minutes, right? And then immediately take off and go back to Memphis and stop somewhere maybe. I don't know. But these possibilities need to be considered. We cannot say, okay, yes, this happened, and then somebody claims something and then we dismiss it. No, we unfortunately have the responsibility to not make up our minds from there. I know most people would love to conclude something very quickly and then stick with that, but we cannot do that. We have to be that systematic, and as I always say, there may be this one specific statement out there that I haven't looked at yet that would move me forward almost all the way to the end and allow me to conclude exactly what happened. That may be out there, that may be yet to come. So I'm not going to listen to these hours and hours of, how many hours of Chris Proudfoot talking is out there? 100 hours altogether? He keeps showing up, but maybe now he no longer does. And by the way, I prefer to listen to Katie. I analyze Chris when I'm running out of Katie's, and there's something where Chris is indicating knowledge, but he's very good at presenting her script, very good at it, because he is completely detached emotionally. He doesn't allow himself to be sidetracked with feelings he doesn't really have about that. See, he just wanted Sebastian out, so there isn't any too much experiential memory because he wasn't there when the thud took place. So he can just stick to the script. He probably goes at it very systematically, in my opinion, reading it almost how we did as kids when we were in a play, to read our lines. And that is why sometimes the answers that he gives, they're not necessarily exactly to the point of what the interviewer asked, but they're similar enough. And people get tired of listening to him. He knows how to wear them out, because he says the same things again and again and again. So people probably think, oh, okay, he's one of those simple-minded fools or whatever you want to call it, and he's like, yeah, that's just, he's a black and white kind of guy. Okay, Chris. They don't expect too much from him. They figure, okay, yeah, that's what he's saying, and let's leave it at that. Because he also indicates that, he lets people know he's not going to go into debates, big debates, or big details rather. The front door was locked, yeah, suspect. Using the term of suspect. Something is suspect, yeah. I think I will look a lot more into Chris Watts now. But I prefer, as I've said before, I prefer to look at the brief statements rather than listening to hours and hours, because I've seen a lot of analysts go systematically and they do hours and hours and hours on somebody, and many times the good part isn't coming until an hour and a half in. I rather get to the good parts and then work my way back and look for anything that may fill in the blanks, and let the evidence and the language guide me, because that's the only thing I can do. So I know what happened that night, in my opinion. I know how Sebastian got injured. I believe that the language reveals he was overstimulated, didn't want to go to sleep, and was over-medicated. This is only my opinion, people, okay? But what happened after? That's what we need to get to.